All right, and then the attendance form is in the chat. Roxy, if you could copy it, like I guess 10 minutes from now and paste it again, since when I share my screen, I can't access the chat. Okay.
Okay.
And I think you're starting off for us.
Okay. Let's get started then.
All right. Yay.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is our lesson number 4. So we're getting very ahead. If you guys have any questions from the past that you want to ask before we start, this is the time. Otherwise, you can always either write it on the chat or hold till the end and we'll answer the questions for you. So let's get started with lesson number 4. This is the part 1 of our phrases or case-specific phrases. And today we will focus on dental terminology and verbs, reviewing prepositions, reviewing present tense conjugation and stem changes, sentences that include ir, a. We're gonna review direct and indirect objects and treatment options practice, and it'll be more focused in restorative treatment. And we'll get started with some dental treatments, los tratamientos dentales. And we're gonna go over each of them. And you can mute yourself and I'll give you a couple seconds to repeat after me. Crown, you'll say la corona. It's a female noun. If you could also say una corona, if you just want to specify that's just one. Then filling is el relleno, or also un relleno. Implant is el implante or un implante. Veneer is la carilla or una carilla. Bridge, el puente o un puente. Restoration, you can say la restauración or una restauración. Sealant, el sellador or un sellador. Let's see, next slide, we have complete denture or la dentadura total, or you could also say la dentadura completa.
I think also placas are dentures, right? Placas are very, I think, like slang, not slang, but like common term. And then parciales are like also common term for partials.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is true. Most patients would know what placa is or would refer to their denture as placa. And la dentadura parcial would be your RPD or partial. You could also say una dentadura parcial or los parciales. Let's see, next. We have dental materials.
1 second, it's like giving me troubles with scroll.
Okay. Okay, there we go. So we have some dental materials, los materiales dentales. The first one we got is composite or resin. You say la resina. Amalgam, la amalgama. Temporary restoration, la restauración temporal. Sometimes might be better to maybe say la corona temporal. I think patients will understand that best. Because a lot of times they don't know dental terms and they might not know like what a restoration is. Porcelain, la porcelana, and gold, el oro. And there's a note here that's very important that oro and porcelana. These are nouns, not really adjectives. So even though they are describing the material, you would say la corona de oro, literally translating to crown of gold. Because if you said corona dorada, using it as an adjective, it would mean literally golden crown. So yeah, best way to say is la corona de oro or la corona de porcelana.
Yeah, and this is a review, if you remember from, I think, one of our second lessons or something, adjectives. If you were to use an adjective, it wouldn't be proper in this case, but if you wanted to remember how we use adjectives in Spanish, it comes after the noun, and the adjective has to match the noun's singularity or plurality. So if you have many of a noun, multiple of the noun, you need to have the adjective reflect that. And same with the gender. If the noun is male or female, so does the adjective has to follow that.
Yeah. And this next slide is a review of what we've seen before, but we'll just go over it again really quickly just to practice the pronunciation. Mouth, la boca. Tooth, el diente. Molar, la muela. Gums, las encías. And bone, el hueso. Then we got front teeth, los dientes de enfrente. Back teeth, los dientes de atrás. Upper teeth, los dientes de arriba. And lower teeth, los dientes de abajo. And this is also a review of our previous lessons when we're talking about demonstrative adjectives. Thing, la cosa, and then this, you could say este for male or esta for female, and these are both singular. And in the plural, these, it would be estos for male and estas for female. And these are describing things that are close to you, or that you could be touching or pointing at them. They're very close to you. That's why we added the little reminder here, like T for touch. Same with here, aquí y acá. Those are things that are very close to you. And that's the attendance sheet. There it is. And then last time, I remember someone asking about estes as a demonstrative adjective, and we said it's not, and it really is not. But the reason why you guys might have seen it before is because it could be a form of the verb is, like estar. If you're saying hi to someone, like hi, I hope you are doing well. In Spanish would be espero que estés bien. So it's not an adjective there. It's a form of the verb, but it might have been what caused some confusion. So for demonstrative adjectives, it's just este, esta, and then plural estos y estas. And the example is, ¿qué es esta cosa aquí? What is this thing here? Other examples, when you do know how to name the object, you just say it. You can say este diente aquí es blanco. This tooth here is white.
Sorry, I accidentally put plural dientes. I'll correct that. But yeah, it's este diente. It's supposed to be singular, guys.
Yeah. So for plural, you would say estos dientes. Okay. See our next. We're describing a place with prepositions, and we had learned that in, on, and at is en in Spanish. Off is de, which is a very popular one. With, con, between, entre, on top of, encima de, and next to, al lado de. Then we have some examples here for en.
On the right is memory aids for you guys, like tiny memory aids to remember.
Yeah, so en sounds similar to on, so that's a good one. And del taco, of the taco. What you meant?
That's
Steph.
just like the little translation of Del Taco, the
Yeah.
restaurant.
Yeah, like del taco can remind you of the. Chili con carne, that one's good. Chili with beef, so that's with means con. Entre is the reminder that the entre comes between an appetizer and dessert. So that's how you can remember between is entre. Encima, cima is close to climax, top of. So encima de means on top of. Al lado de, we have a lad is always by your side. So next to is al lado de. And some dental related examples would be restore the tooth with a filling of amalgam. So restaurar el diente con un relleno de amalgama. You have plaque next to the tooth. Tiene sarro al lado del diente. On these teeth, you have caries in between the teeth. En estos dientes, tiene caries entre los dientes. See, now we have some verb conjugation.
We can just go through this one really quickly because there's the table at the end, but this is just to review for you guys.
Yeah, so the table at the end tells you how to change the stem if the verb ends with AR, ER, or EIR. So for AR, we're going to have yo hablo for the verb hablar, which means to speak. Yo hablo. Tú hablas, which is the informal form that we're not really using to talk to our patients. We'll be using the usted form. So usted habla or él, ella habla. Nosotros o nosotras hablamos. And ellos, ellas o ustedes hablan for the plural. And then next slide, we have the ER, and it's the verb beber, which means to drink. We're going to say yo bebo, tú bebes, él, ella, usted bebe, nosotros o nosotras bebemos, ellos, ellas o ustedes beben. And then the IR verb, which is it's very similar to the ER, except for the we form. So this is the verb vivir, which means to live. And I go, yo vivo, tú vives, él, ella o usted vive, nosotros, nosotras vivimos, and ellos, ellas o ustedes viven. And then we have the verb that we mentioned, which you can always refer to. It's a rule that always applies. Yeah.
And this is the table if you guys wanted to take a memory picture of it for those of you with photographic memory. Reminder that AR verbs have a lot of A in their ending. ER verbs have a lot of E in their ending, and IR verbs usually follow ER verbs. And in this case, like Roxy said, the only exception is nosotros and nosotras, and it's instead of hemos, it's imos.
Yeah, so just a different way to look at it. Some people are able to remember better with that chart.
So I guess if you want to, Roxy, go over these verbs and then maybe pick a couple for people to try and conjugate. Just a couple easy ones. I know extraer is a little complicated.
Yeah, it's hard, yes. So we can pick the first one, rellenar, to fill. So it's an AR verb, if anyone wants to to take it, give it a try?
Just in the yo form, present tense.
Is it relleno?
Yeah. Yo relleno. Muy bien. And then preparar is to prep.
Yo preparo.
Yes, very good. And now sacar, which is to extract. Yes, someone in the chat said saco. Yes, yo saco. Very good. Extraer is a little complicated in the yo form. Somehow it changes to yo extraigo. So I think it might be easier to say yo voy a extraer, which is something that Steph is going to go over in a little bit. I think it's if you can remember the conjugation of the verb, you can just say I am going to extract without having to change the verb. So you can say yo voy a extraer. And then, like I said, we're going to go over it in future slides. Then the next one is limpiar, to clean. Anyone knows the yo form of it?
Yo limpio.
Very good. And these are all present tense, which is good. Then the next one is root canal or hacer endodoncia. Root canal, a lot of patients also know it by tratamiento de conducto. So, because a lot of patients don't know what endodoncia means. Yeah, and then also for SRP, scaling and root planing, hacer un raspado y alisado radicular. Some patients might still not know what all that means. So you can say limpieza profunda, like deep cleaning.
I would say too, hacer is another one of those irregular verbs that we talked about a while ago. It's used a lot, so it's very useful to memorize all the exceptions, but in the yo form, it would be hago and not hago. And we kind of go over, we call them go verbs, and we go over them a little bit in the coming slides.
Yeah. Okay, and then we have a few more dental treatments. They are do surgery, hacer una cirugía. So you would say, yo hago una cirugía. To take an impression, tomar una impresión. Yo tomo una impresión. Then to take a radiograph, tomar una radiografía. You can say, yo tomo una radiografía. Do an application of fluoride, hacer una aplicación de fluoruro. You can say, yo hago una aplicación de fluoruro. And do teeth whitening, hacer el blanqueamiento dental. Yo hago el blanqueamiento dental. Okay, turn it over to Steph now.
Roxy, do you mind posting the link again for attendance?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so this is where we're going to talk about stem changes. And I know for those of you that attended last week, it was a very heavy lesson. So and it's one of the concepts that gets confusing, especially for beginners. So we're just going to reemphasize the things that you learned last week in a different way. So what is a stem change? We keep talking about irregular verbs and how they conjugate weirdly. And they might seem kind of weird, but some of the irregular verbs do follow their own rules. And a lot of those are stem changes. And how do you do a stem change? So first you get the stem, and we all know how to get the stem. That's when you just remove the AR, ER, IR off of the verb. And then you kind of look in that stem, like tener, we have ten, so it's TEN. You now want to look at the last few letters of that. And in some verbs, if there's an E in the last few letters, you will change it to an IE, and this is the most common one. If it's an E, it could also change to an I. If it's an O, it could change to UE, although this one's not as common. We kind of rated them most common to least common, especially in the dental setting. It's not used that much with the verbs that we use. An I to IE is very rare, and a U to UE is very rare, but they exist. I also want to note that stem changes will also be different for different tenses. These are the ones for the present tense only. So if you're going to do them in the command tense or past tense, they might have their own stem changes. They don't always apply across all of the conjugations. So we're just going to take it slowly and learn it for the present tense. More notes at the bottom of this. These stem changes, when you take the E in then and change it to tien with the IE, that stem change will apply for all of the present tense conjugations except for the nosotros forms. It will, for all of these verbs in the present tense, they're going to conjugate normally in the nosotros form only. And then remember how we were talking about hacer becomes hago? It's not something unique to stem change words. It happens to a lot of random verbs in the Spanish language. But in the yo form present tense, we have what are called go verbs. And for one reason or another, sometimes I think it's a spelling thing and grammar or like a spelling rule thing. Other times it just seems kind of random. But these verbs in the yo present tense will have a go ending. And yeah, like I said, stem changes will be different in different tenses. Let's see. Okay, so I was talking about tener. So its stem is ten, and E is the part we'll be changing to IE. And right below, I have the way we originally learned it in lesson 1, how we would think it would be conjugated if we didn't apply the stem change. So the first blue table is the incorrect way to conjugate tener. So you get your stem from tener by removing the ER, you get ten. And then you'd add O, S, E, hemos, and N for your conjugations to get what you would think would be teno, tenes, tene, tenemos, tenen. But since we know this is a stem change, we know that this is incorrect. And we will go ahead and apply that stem change on the bottom half of this slide. And our new stem is now tien, and we'll get our correct conjugation. So tener, we subtract the ER, get ten. We apply our stem change, and then becomes tien. And I also want to note that tener is one of those go verbs. So we'll see the go verb right here. So we get yo tengo instead of tieno or teno. We get tú tienes instead of tú tenes. And note that the endings on the conjugation are still the same. You're still adding O, S, E, hemos, and N. The only thing that's going to change is the stem itself. We get él tiene, not él tiene. Nosotros, if you remember, does not change with the stem. So we still get tenemos. And then lastly, we get ellos tienen, not ellos tienen. And the same rules apply for each of our other stem changes, O to UE and E to I. So let's try this now with poder. Poder means to be able to do something. Its stem, we would think would be pod, P-O-D. So we look at that O and we change it to UE to get our new stem, which is pued. And so our correct conjugation, once we now have our new stem pued, we just add the endings and we get puedo, yo puedo. And note that it's not a go verb here. So it's yo puedo, tú puedes, él puede, nosotros doesn't change with stem. So it's just podemos, not podemos. And ellos pueden. And at the bottom is the incorrect way to conjugate poder without the stem change. And lastly, let's try this with our E to I stem change with decir, which means to say something or to talk. So our stem we would expect to be this, D-E-C. So we're going to take that E in this and change it to I. And now our new stem is dis. Decir happens to also be a go verb. So that's why we see digo. But for the rest, we apply the stem and add the endings as normal, and it's tú dices, él dice. We don't do stem change for nosotros, so it's nosotros decimos, and ellos dicen. And at the bottom is the incorrect way without the stem change. So hopefully that made sense. We will try and make it easy on you guys since it's just kind of a pattern you learn with time. So anytime we ask you to conjugate these words, we will give you what the stem change is. And so on this slide, we'll practice applying stem changes. So if you wanted to recommend a bridge, the verb for recommend is recomendar. So how would you conjugate that E to IE stem change in the yo present tense? Anyone want to give it a stab?
Yo recomiendo.
Yeah, yo recomiendo. So we've highlighted the stem change in red. So instead of yo recomiendo, it's yo recomiendo because you've taken your stem recommend with the END ending. You take the E and you change it to IE. Okay, someone want to try querer, which is an E to IE stem change, and that would be a usted present tense, I believe.
¿Usted quiere?
Yep, usted quiere. Usted quiere un relleno de amalgama, sorry, tongue twister, amalgama. Yeah, you got it perfect. All right, and then if someone wants to try costar, and this would be the el, ella, usted form as well because crowns are third person inanimate object. So it'd be el, ella, usted, and it's an O-to-U-E stem change.
Los cuestan.
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 Yeah. So it's in the present tense, the AR will have a lot of A endings. So if you were to do a different tense, it might be cuestan, but in the present tense, it'd be cuestan. But you got the stem change correct, so good job. And I guess if anyone had any questions on these sentences or their form, wanted to delve deeper, let us know. But okay. And then Roxy was saying, yes, if you are getting tripped up by how complicated it is to conjugate some words, you can easily get out of it by using the voy a or vamos a, which is something you're going to do. We taught you guys this in lesson 1. And so if you remember, ir means to go, and it can be used to mean like to be about to do something, to go do something. And in the yo form, ir is voy, and in the nosotros or we form, it's vamos. So the way you add this together, typically in Spanish, when you have two verbs forming like a phrase together, the first verb, which in this case is ir, will be conjugated. And the second verb you could just keep in its dictionary form, so you don't need to conjugate it. So if you just remember voy and vamos, you can get out of conjugating whatever second verb you want to use. So if you want to say, I'm going to do something, you would say, voy a blank. In this case, it's voy a poner, or I'm going to place a bridge, un puente. And if you wanted to say, like, today, patient, we are going to do this, you could say, vamos a poner un puente. And this is going to be a complicated test your skills slide to see how much you guys remember. If you're shy, it's okay if you want to focus on like one thing. We've color coded it so that each of the concepts are are easily distinguishable. So does anyone want to take a stab at the first sentence, translating it?
I can try real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's voy a extraer estos dientes.
Yeah, you got it. Perfect. So voy is for those of you that are catching up with how quick that was, voy is what we just learned, your form of ir, you're going to. Extraer is just our vocab word that you don't need to conjugate in this case because we used the voy a. Earlier on, Roxy went over estos, estas, and este, esta. And so teeth is plural, dientes, and it's male, so we would use estos. Anyone want to take a stab at the second sentence before we move on? We might have to move through these a little quickly. Also, the vocab words are at the bottom if you need to take a second to piece that together.
Usted quiere el relleno entre ustedes dientes?
Okay, very close. So relleno would just be filling, but if you wanted to say composite filling, do you remember how you would say that? Remembering that composite's a noun and not an adjective.
I do not remember.
Okay, so I guess think our key example is just crown of gold. So anytime you want to say something is a material made of something else, you would say crown of gold. You could say crown of porcelain, filling of amalgam, filling of composite. So it would be the relleno de resina. And resina is resin or composite. Other than that, yeah, you got it pretty good. I hope that makes sense to you guys. You could also say, sorry, what was that?
Oh, I was just gonna say that if they wanted to use the possessive form of your teeth, it could be sus dientes.
Mm-hmm. Or
Yeah.
los dientes, yeah, either way.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing you can say, because maybe someone doesn't know what resin is or what composite is, just say un relleno blanco, which is a white filling. So in that case, blanco is an adjective, and so you don't need the relleno de blanco. It's just relleno blanco because it's an adjective, so it comes after. It's describing. You're not saying composite of white because white's is not an object. Hope that makes sense. Okay, and then this is our next big concept that you guys covered last time, but we're going to go over it and delve in a little bit more because this is a really complicated subject for beginners. So in English, you know, unless you're writing an essay and you're not meeting your word count, you know, you're not going to say the subject and everything and repeat it in every sentence. It's kind of like you want to say it and refer to things indirectly because it sounds weird when you're constantly speaking with someone. You're saying, I talked to Samantha the other day. Samantha is a great person. Samantha did this and then Samantha did that, you know? You will then kind of refer to them indirectly or directly. And that's how it works in Spanish too. You can use it and hint at whatever you're talking about, but it's non-specific. Breaking it down into grammar, the way you do that would be with direct and indirect object pronouns. So what is a direct object? A direct object is something that is going to be directly acted upon with a verb by the subject of the sentence. An indirect object, especially in terms of dentistry, is often going to be the recipient of the direct object. So let's say you're filling someone's tooth. The dentist is the subject. They are the ones filling. And the direct object that's being acted upon by the filling, what's getting filled is the tooth. So there the tooth is the direct object. What's receiving the filled tooth? It's the patient. So the dentist filled my tooth, it for me. And below is our table of the direct, indirect object pronouns. It's pretty simple for a lot of them. Like me is the same in direct and indirect. Same with te, same with nos. They're both the same. You don't need to do any extra memorization with that. It's also nice because me looks a lot like me, which is kind of what it directly translates to. The only place where it gets a little complicated is in the third person. Usted or él, ella, and ustedes or ellos, ellas. And that's because you have things separated not only by gender, but also direct, indirect object pronouns. So below, we'll dissect it a bit more, but we've included things that are in that third person. So if you wanted to say the tooth in the third person or refer to it as it, well, the tooth, diente, singular, is male. So it wouldn't be, we look in the column for direct object pronoun because it's being acted upon. And we know it's not la because it's not a feminine noun. We know it's lo. So we would use lo for tooth here. And la dentista lo rellenó. The dentist filled the tooth, or the dentist filled it is what we're literally saying here, because lo is replacing the specific word, the tooth. Now, if you want to do it, if you want to say that same thing and say it for me, me in this case would be an indirect object pronoun because I'm the one receiving the filled tooth. You would say la dentista me rellenó. And then I put in gray el diente because you need to, if you're not going to use lo, you need to include what you're talking about. Now, if we put that together and now we're not just using one indirect object or just the direct object, we're using them both in this sentence, you would say the dentist is filling it for me is me lo. La dentista me lo rellenó. And again, we're going to go break this down a bit more of why it's structured like this, but these are just to get you start thinking. And if you're going to say it with double third person, it and you, usted, we would think we'd take from le, the column, the indirect object pronoun le, and lo, but as you'll learn soon, we don't put le and lo or third person pronouns together like that because it just sounds weird with a lot of L's together. So we change it to celo. And so now let's break it down a bit more if your head is a little swimming right now. So where do indirect and direct objects go in a sentence? The first rule is that indirect objects always are placed before their direct objects. So that's kind of like saying, give me it. Me is the indirect object, it is the thing I'm receiving. So give me it, the indirect object comes before the indirect object comes before the direct object. Okay, so indirect always before direct. Next, where do we place each of these words in a sentence together? So overall, in a sentence, the indirect and direct objects will be either, there's three situations in the present tense. They will be added on to an unconjugated dictionary verb. And you can see below, we have the verb dar, which is unconjugated. And we would get dártelo, give you the thing. Dártelo. It's kind of just created into one big conglomerate word. Two, we can place it before a conjugated verb. So yo te lo di. Te lo di. We still have te lo with the indirect coming before the direct, but now they appear as they're separate words before the verb. And now the last situation we'll talk about in this case is, what if you want to say you didn't give something, you're not doing something? You still place the objects before the conjugated verb and you just add a no in front of it. So no te lo di. And at the bottom, we I believe you guys last time talked about how to do this with command tense. And it's very similar to this. You would, because actually, yeah. So in command tense, we would add it like situation 1, just add it on to the end of the positive command verb conjugation. And if you wanted to do a negative command, which is no, don't do something, you would again have the no placed before the objects and then the conjugated verb. So no me lo de, but we won't worry about that for today. Okay. And we have this thing called the Lelo Rule, is what I like to call it. And this happens when we take our lovely, very confusing third person direct, indirect object pronouns. If we have these in the same sentence, like I said, there's a lot of le, lo, la, les. It's a lot of L's. It sounds really awkward. And in Spanish, lelo is like slang for silly or fool. So that's how I like to remember this rule. You don't want to sound like a fool. So you're going to change the le and les, the indirect object pronouns, to se. So now instead of having lelo or lela or les, los, les, la, anything, these both just get changed to se. So it'd be celo, cela, celos, and celas. And here's a literal translation. Like, I placed a crown for her. Yo puse la corona para ella. We would think it would be le la puse, but le la sounds weird. It's the Lelo rule, so it's se la puse. The nice thing about this is now you just have all your indirect object pronouns being se, and it feels like less to memorize. Breaking it down even further, here's our stepwise formula. So we have our table at the top. Step 1, for our sentence, we will place the crown on me. You would identify your subject, which is we, and you will identify your verb. In this case, our verb is a phrase, which is will place, or that would be vamos a poner. So we identify that as our subject and verb. And then we try and identify our direct and indirect objects. So what is being acted upon vamos a poner? And it's going to be the crown. The crown is the thing that's being placed. And who is receiving that crown? What is the indirect object? That would be me. So the crown is going to be placed on me. So we've color-coded the sentence. We will place the crown, the direct object, on me, the indirect object. Now we do step 2. So we kind of look at our table to see what will our object pronouns be. We want to pay attention to the gender and the plurality, especially if it's in usted, ustedes, third person. So crown is la corona, and we know that it's female because of the A ending, and we know it's singular because there's no S. So we look at our table, and direct object under usted, which is singular, would either be lo or la. We know it's not lo because it's not male, so it has to be la. And we do the same for yo, which is me, and me would be me in this case. And it doesn't matter if it's direct or indirect, it's always going to be me. So step 3, we conjugate our verb according to the subject, vamos a poner, and then we need to decide where to place our indirect and direct object pronouns. So rule number 1, indirect always comes before direct. It's always give me it, not give it to me. Give me it is kind of an example of how the order goes. So we have 3 situations. We either add it onto the end of an unconjugated verb, vamos a ponérmela. 2, add it before a conjugated verb, almost like they're their own words now, me la voy a poner. Or 3, if we want to say the negative, we would just add a no onto the front, and no me la voy a poner. And that sounds simple enough, I hope. But now step 4, let's take the situation where we need to apply the Lelo rule. Do we need to apply the Lelo rule in this case? No, because we're not using 2 third persons. We're using me, and we're using one of the third persons. So we don't need to apply the rule in this case. There's not a lot of L's going on. But if we wanted to say we're going to place the crown on you and it's usted, that is another third person. And that's where we'll have a lot of the L's going on and we'll need to use the Lelo rule. So if you're not to apply to the Lelo rule, it would be la for corona, we keep that. And we would think it would be le for usted because we see indirect object under usted and it's le. But in this case, we know we can't have lela, that violates the Lelo rule. So we need to change le to se. So here now we have vamos a ponérsela, se la voy a poner, or no se la voy a poner. And I think since this is a really tough subject, one of the last things we'll do, depending on time, kind of put your hand over the left side of the screen and we'll just have whoever is brave enough to volunteer try and translate from Spanish to English what you think it is saying. So if I said tomarle una radiografía, what would the le and tomar mean? Tomarle una radiografía. Tomarle. Knowing that tomar means to take and una radiografía means a radiograph. Take a radiograph. What does le mean here?
For you.
Yeah, so I'm assuming you didn't cheat. But yeah, tomarle, we go back to our table. Indirect object, what's receiving the radiograph? You're taking a radiograph of the tooth, but the patient is the indirect object receiving the radiograph, who you're doing it for. So we look and we see it's le. And nice thing is there is no direct object here. It's just, that's why it's just blue. So we don't need to worry about the Lelo rule or anything. It's just tomarle. Does someone want to take a stab at prepararlo? What would prepararlo mean? Preparar means to prepare. What does the lo? What are we preparing?
The tooth.
The tooth. Yeah. So, and we know it's not going to be prepararle in this case, because that's just saying you're preparing it for someone, but you're not really saying what you're preparing, you know? You're not saying what the verb is acting on. So that's why it's a direct object here. If you were saying prepararle, that's you offering to do something, preparing something for someone. But if you're going to say to your patient, like, I'm going to prepare it, the tooth, right now, you would say prepararlo instead. Last one, before we maybe try one slide of other practice, we have a combination of indirect and direct object if someone wants to take a stab at it. Rellenárselo con resina. Rellenar, to fill. Con resina is with composite. So you're going to fill something with composite. What does the se lo mean? What is se and what is lo?
Se is for the indirect and then lo is for the object.
Yeah. Yeah, so it takes kind of like the first two sentences and puts them together. We wouldn't have lelo because that is the Lelo rule. So you would have selo here. So that's perfect. Okay. Roxy, did you want to maybe try leading one of the examples?
Sure. So
Okay.
on this one, we have two options of dental treatments and material for the patient. So let's see. Ms. Velasquez de Ruiz, I took some radiographs. You have caries on top of the tooth and an impacted molar. Señora Velázquez de Ruiz, tomé unas radiografías, tiene caries, blank, y una blank. So we do have a word bank, but you also need to remember the vocab that's involved there, and we reviewed that today. So anyone who wants to take a shot at it? So for tiene caries, on top of the tooth, tiene caries. On top of would be encima de, and the tooth would be el diente. So tiene caries encima de el diente. And an impacted molar. Y una muela impactada. You just change the gender there.
Yeah, that reapplies the brief review we did on adjectives, where impactado is obviously, it has an O ending, so it's male. Muela is female, so we need to change it because adjectives always come after their nouns and they always match the plurality and the gender.
Yeah, if it was diente, you would say diente impactado.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the next one, we can extract the molar and, so does anyone want to give that one a try? With poder, if you remember the stem change for we, it actually stays the same. So a little hint there. So we would be talking about nosotros, but you don't really have to say nosotros. You can say podemos, and it's already implied. So you can say podemos extraer la muela.
And then, since we're 3 minutes away, do we just want to read the last ones?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Prepare and fill your other tooth with composite or amalgam. Preparar y rellenar el otro diente con resina o amalgama. And extract your other tooth too and place an implant. También extraer el otro diente y poner un implante.
All right. And there's more like sample slides for you guys, just kind of emphasizing the topics that were covered this lesson and last time. So if you wanted to look over those, they're there. We tried to make them easy. But yeah.
Yeah, there are definitely things that you will use in the clinic, and you just give it a try on your own time. You can do it English to Spanish or Spanish to English.
Mm-hmm. I will say too, indirect and direct objects are very, very confusing for everyone when they first start out, especially speaking wise. It's easier to write it and look at a table, but speaking it is a little hard. So we want to emphasize that you don't necessarily need to use it when you speak Spanish, but it's important to know how to listen to it when someone else is speaking to you, because a native speaker will be using them like throughout all of their sentences all the time. It's very common. So as long as you can listen and like have kind of like an ear for picking up on what they might be saying, it's a lot easier to do that anyway. So just try and emphasize what is possible for you and practice that. Other than that, hopefully everyone filled out the survey. Roxy, do you mind posting it again?
Yeah, one more time.
Okay, before we all go. Thanks guys for coming. We have our last lesson, I think, on the 18th at our usual time, 6 p.m. And it'll be more procedure specific stuff. Kind of like today, we went over a lot of direct and indirect. Next time, I believe they'll be going over other aspects of dentistry and those vocabs. But yeah, okay. I will stop recording.